Hey everyone! Today we're diving into the interesting story of the Sui Dynasty. Even though it was pretty short, only lasting from 581 to 618 CE, with just two emperors, the Sui managed to do something huge. They unified China after a long period of chaos during the Northern and Southern Dynasties. Now, like many short-lived dynasties in Chinese history, they made some big changes that laid the groundwork for the more famous Tang Dynasty, where Chinese culture really thrived. The Sui Dynasty brought in reforms that centralized the government, improved civil service, and changed how land was distributed. But while they were making these big structural improvements, they also became known for their corruption, massive spending, and military disasters, which ultimately led to their downfall. So how did this all start? Well, by the late 6th century, China was divided with different states constantly fighting for control. But in 581 CE, a military commander named Jian, later known as Emperor Wen, stepped in. He used his power and connections, including his daughter's marriage to the heir of the Northern Zhou dynasty, to take control of the north. He wasn't messing around either. He even had 59 members of the royal family killed to solidify his position. Then, in 588 CE, he turned his attention to the south, pulling together a massive army and fleet to conquer it. By 589 CE, all of China was unified again, with the capital in Chang'an, and the Sui Dynasty was officially born. Despite its short reign, the Sui made some major moves. Wen, and later his son Yang, expanded China's territory, reformed the government, and simplified the law code. They also introduced a merit-based system for appointing officials, which cut down on corruption and gave people a fairer shot. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The Sui spent a fortune on lavish building projects like palaces and canals, which strained the empire's resources. One of the biggest projects was the Grand Canal, connecting the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. Sure, it was a massive undertaking and involved a lot of forced labor, but it was a game changer for moving troops and supplies. Even though Yang might have been a little too focused on luxury, like traveling on his barges surrounded by hundreds of women, the canal ended up being crucial for future dynasties like the Tang. And the Sui were pretty ambitious when it came to military campaigns. They didn't just want to defend their borders, they had big plans to expand them. One of the key defenses was the Great Wall, which they strengthened to keep the Eastern Turks or Tuju at bay. But their ambitions stretched beyond just keeping invaders out. In the south, things were looking good at first. The Sui army successfully pushed into what's now southern Vietnam, defeating the Annam and Champa. They even took down armies using war elephants, which sounds wild. But the Sui had a trick up their sleeve. They used crossbows to scare the elephants, causing them to panic and trample their own troops. Pretty clever, right? Unfortunately, while the elephants weren't much of a threat, tropical diseases like malaria wiped out large numbers of the Chinese soldiers who weren't used to such conditions. Things got even worse when the Sui turned their attention to the kingdom of Goguryeo, in what's now Korea and northern Manchuria. Their first attempt to invade in 598 CE ended in disaster. They ran out of supplies, got hit with heavy rains, and had to retreat. But they weren't ready to give up. The Sui tried again in 611 CE, this time by sea, but their fleet was destroyed by a storm. Talk about bad luck. Still determined, Yang himself led a massive invasion in 612 CE, but the Goguryeo general, Ochi Mendok, was ready for them. At the Battle of Salsu River, the Sui suffered a crushing defeat, with legend claiming only 2,700 of the 300,000-strong army made it back home. Two more invasions followed in 613 and 614 CE, but they didn't fare any better. Eventually, Goguryeo built a massive defensive wall to keep the Chinese at bay for good. These failures hit Emperor Yang hard. His reputation took a serious hit, especially since he was the one leading these disastrous campaigns. The losses in Korea, combined with the suffering of the Chinese peasants due to heavy taxation and forced labor, sparked widespread rebellion in 613 CE. It only got worse with more defeats, this time against the Eastern Turks. By 617 CE, the rebellions had grown out of control, and the final blow came when Yangdi was assassinated by the son of one of his own generals. With his death, the Sui Dynasty collapsed, and the Tang Dynasty, led by Li Yuan, later known as Emperor Gaozu, rose to power. While Yangdi is often remembered as a tyrant by later historians, his father, Emperor Wen, left behind a much better reputation. Wen was praised for his support of Confucian and Taoist scholars and for promoting Buddhism, which earned him the nickname, the Cultured Emperor. This contrast between the two emperors reflects the mixed legacy of the Sui dynasty as a whole. They helped unify and modernize China, but their excessive spending and neglect of the people's well-being ultimately led to their downfall.